Charity gala. Chandeliers blazing. Meg freezes in the middle of the crowd, eyes locked onto the throat of a stranger in a red dress. Meg, barely a whisper. Voice strangled. That necklace belonged to my grandmother. Coffee shop. The next morning, Serena sets the velvet pouch on the table, hands trembling. I didn't know he had a wife. He told me this was a family heirloom. A gift for me. Meg, voice cold, steady as iron, my family's heirloom. My great-grandmother carried it out of Scotland in 1922. My mother left it specifically to me, not to the marriage. Serena, face draining of color, voice barely holding, he told me it was worth around $20,000. Meg, one beat of silence, eyes sharp as a blade. He was off by exactly $2,280,000. Serena's mouth falls open. Two women lock eyes across the table and realize they were both deceived by the same man. Narrator. When a $1 million family heirloom showed up around another woman's neck, the wife did something nobody saw coming. Read the full story below. The ending will leave you speechless. The first thing she heard was heels on marble. Her own, and then 100 other pairs, all moving in the particular rhythm of people who had places to be and wanted you to know it. The gala was in full swing. The sound of it filled the Hartfield ballroom like weather. Crystal glasses chiming against crystal glasses. A string quartet doing its determined best against the tide of conversation. The low roar of old money talking to new money, working out the terms of a comfortable friendship. Margaret Calloway stood at the edge of the room. She preferred the edges of rooms, always had. In her work as an antiques appraiser, you learned quickly that the edges were where you saw things clearly. The center of any room was full of noise and performance. The edge was where the real picture assembled itself. She was 53 years old. She was wearing the navy dress. Claire called it the armor dress. It fit her well, and it required nothing in the way of vulnerability. She held a glass of white wine she had not touched. Douglas was somewhere in the middle of the room. She could hear him before she found him. His laugh, the specific, projected laugh he used at these events, slightly louder than his real laugh, calibrated for an audience. She turned her head and located him near the bar. Two men she recognized from his development business. Douglas in his charcoal suit, telling a story with his hands. He had not noticed her yet. This was not unusual. She looked back at the room. She watched it the way she always watched rooms, assessing, quiet, reading the pieces. The floral arrangements were good but not excellent. The catering was efficient. The auction items along the eastern wall were a mixed lot, nothing particularly distinguished. She had appraised 2 of them herself 6 months ago and privately thought the estimates were optimistic. That was when she saw it, not the woman first, the necklace first. This was simply how her eyes worked after 30 years of appraisal training. She saw the object before she saw the person. She registered the specific quality of light that very old metal and very old stones produced, even across a crowded room. The way Georgian silver caught chandelier light differently than modern silver. The particular wink of Colombian emeralds under warm illumination. She saw that and her brain went very still. There was a woman in a red dress, dark hair, confident posture, the posture of a woman who had been looked at and knew it and had made peace with it long ago. She was laughing at something a gray-haired man was saying, her head tilted back, and there, against the clean line of her throat, against the red of the dress, catching the light in exactly the way it had always caught the light since 1785. The Whitfield necklace, Georgian, circa 1785, 18 diamonds set in silver-topped gold, 5 Colombian emeralds, cushion-cut, untreated, the color of deep water. The centerpiece emerald, 2.3 carats, internally flawless. She knew every stone. She had appraised it herself 15 years ago for the estate insurance. She had held each stone under her loupe and written the description in careful professional language and handed the report to her mother. Her mother's necklace, her grandmother's before that. Her great-grandmother Eleanor brought it from Edinburgh in 1922, sewn into the hem of a coat, that necklace, on a stranger's throat. The wine glass was still in her hand. She became very aware of this specific fact. She did not drop it. She was the kind of woman who did not drop things in public. She had learned this about herself early, and the knowledge had been useful in many situations. Her mind did something very particular in that moment. It did not spiral. It did not scream. It went completely and perfectly still, like a room when the wind stops. She thought, I need to check the jewelry box. And then immediately after, I do not need to check the jewelry box. She knew. The way you know things you have been not knowing for some time, things that have been quietly accumulating in the back of a room you do not open. You walk past the door every day, and you do not open it. And then one day the door opens anyway. She looked across the room. She found Douglas again. He was still at the bar, still mid-law, still completely at ease. She watched his face for 4 full seconds. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who had managed every variable and found his arrangement satisfactory. He had not seen her yet. She looked back at the woman in the red dress. The woman glanced over, caught Meg's eye, smiled the polite and weightless smile that strangers exchanged at charity galas. The smile of someone who did not know they were standing in front of the wife. Meg smiled back. She set her wine glass on the nearest table, carefully. She opened her clutch, she took out her phone, she took one photograph. The woman in the red dress was clearly visible. The necklace was clearly visible. The chandelier light was doing her a favor. She put the phone away. She found her coat. She did not say goodnight to anyone. She walked out of the Hartfield ballroom with the same quiet steps she used when she walked out of auction houses. No rush, nothing to signal. The parking garage was cold and smelled like concrete and engine oil. She found her car. She got in. She did not start the engine. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at them. They were not shaking. She noticed this with something close to curiosity. She had assumed they would be shaking. 11 minutes she sat there. She knew because she looked at the clock. 11 minutes of the parking garage and her own breathing and the distant sound of the city pressing in through the concrete walls. She thought, okay, so now I know. She thought, think, Meg. Think the way you think at work. Think like an appraiser. When you find a piece in the wrong hands, you do not reach for it. You do not make accusations before you have established provenance. You document, you verify. You gather the complete record before you say a single word. You find out everything first. She started the engine. She drove home. She went to the jewelry box before she took her coat off. Third drawer, left side. The velvet pouch, dark green, old, tied with a silk cord. She could see the shape of it in her mind so clearly that it took her a moment to register that the shape was absent. Gone, she opened every drawer. She was methodical about it. She checked the bottom of the box. She checked the shelf beneath it. She checked the small safe in the back of the closet, the one Douglas had never had a key to. She was thorough because thoroughness mattered. She spent 19 minutes being certain. The velvet pouch was gone too. Not just the necklace, the pouch as well. He had taken them together. He did not grab it in a hurry. He took his time. He took the pouch. He knew exactly what he had. She sat on the edge of the bed. The bedroom was quiet in the way that houses are quiet at midnight when you have been holding something heavy for a long time and finally set it down. He knows what that necklace is worth. I told him. I made the mistake of telling him. She picked up her phone. She called Claire. Claire answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring. I need you, Meg said. There was half a beat of silence. Just half. I will bring wine, Claire said. The real kind. Claire arrived in 40 minutes. She was still in her own gala dress. She had left her own event. She did not mention this. She looked at Meg's face when Meg opened the door, and she did not ask if she was all right. This was one of the many things Meg loved about Claire. She knew the question would be an insult. She could see for herself that Meg was not all right. She opened the wine. She poured 2 glasses. She sat across from Meg at the kitchen table and she waited. Meg told her. All of it. She was methodical. The woman in the red dress, the necklace, the jewelry box, the velvet pouch, the timing of it, the deliberateness of it. She showed Claire the photograph. Claire took the phone. She looked at the photograph for a long time. She enlarged it with 2 fingers. She looked at the necklace, then looked at Meg. How long has it been missing? Claire asked. I do not know exactly, Meg said. I have not worn it since my mother's memorial 3 years ago. So he has had years to, Claire began. 3 years, Meg said, or less. I do not know precisely. I never checked it. I trusted it was there. She said that last sentence like a confession. Like she was embarrassed by the fact of trusting something she should have verified. Like the trusting itself had been the error. Claire's jaw tightened. She had been a corporate attorney for 23 years. She did not cry easily, but her jaw did a specific thing when she was angry, and it was doing that thing now. You need a lawyer, Claire said. I know, Meg replied. Tonight I am the lawyer. In the morning you call Donna Greer. She handled your mother's estate. She knows the provenance on that necklace. I know, Meg said again. Meg, I know, Claire. They sat with that for a moment. Then Claire asked the question she had been holding since she walked through the door. How long have you known? About a woman? Meg picked up her wine glass. She set it down without drinking from it. I did not know about a woman specifically, she said. I knew something. You know how you know something, but you decide to live your life anyway. Because investigating it means the answer comes back, and then you cannot unknow it. Claire nodded. She did know that particular bargain. She had made versions of it herself in different circumstances, and she had never once been proud of it. I decided to live my life, Meg said. And apparently while I was doing that, he was stealing my grandmother's jewelry. The word stealing landed in the kitchen like something dropped from a considerable height. Heavy, final. The word that changed the category of everything that preceded it. Meg got up. She went to the window. The street outside was quiet. A neighbor's porch light was still on, orange and steady against the dark. The memory came the way memories do. Without invitation, her mother's hands, thin by the end but still precise, still capable of doing what they had always done. Taking the necklace out of the green velvet pouch, holding it up to the lamplight so the stones caught it in the way they always caught it. Every woman in our family wore this, her mother had said. Your great-grandmother Eleanor wore it when she testified before the Edinburgh City Council in 1931. They told her to sit down and be quiet. She was wearing this necklace, and she did not sit down and she was not quiet. Meg had been 49 years old that night, sitting on the edge of her mother's bed, believing, stupidly, that she had more time. This is not jewelry, her mother said. This is armor, and she clasped it around Meg's neck, cool and heavy and sure. The particular cool of very old metal, the particular weight of something that had outlasted every pair of hands that held it. I am leaving it to you in the will, her mother said. Not to the marriage, to you. That distinction, her mother had drawn that distinction very carefully. She had said those two things as if she was placing them on opposite sides of a scale and watching to see which way it tipped. I know it is valuable, Meg had said. It is worth more than money, her mother said, but it is also worth a lot of money. 2-point-something million last I checked. I kept the appraisal. And I told Donna, not to the marriage, to you. Standing at the kitchen window, Meg closed her eyes. He knew, she had told him herself, she could place the dinner with precise accuracy. The salmon, the white wine, the particular quality of late afternoon light coming through the dining room windows. She had told him the insurance appraisal had come back at 2.3 million, and she had watched his face, just for a fraction of a second. A flicker. Something calculating behind the eyes, gone in half a second, replaced with the correct expression. Warm interest. Appropriate admiring comments about her family's history. She saw it. She told herself she was imagining it. She was not imagining it. He had been patient. That was what she understood now. He took it at a moment of his choosing, when she was still raw with grief, when he knew she would not check. She turned away from the window. Claire, she said. Yeah, Claire replied. I want to be strategic. I do not want to be only emotional. I am very emotional and I am allowed to be, but I want to be strategic at the same time. Both things. Claire almost smiled. It was the most entirely Meg thing Meg had ever said. Both things, Claire confirmed. So I need to know two things right now. One, does he know I saw? And two, what does it mean legally that the necklace was left to me, specifically not to the marriage? Claire leaned forward. This was her territory. She was very calm in her territory. He probably does not know you saw, Claire said. You left without a scene. He will come home and assume you were tired. He will assume he is fine. Good, Meg said, as for the legal question. The bequest matters enormously. If the will specifies the necklace was left to you and not to the marital estate, that is separate property. He cannot claim it. Taking it was not rearranging marital assets. It was theft. The word again, theft. It had the weight of the true thing. All right, Meg said. She went to the hallway closet. She came back with a cardboard box. Her mother's estate papers. She found the copy of the will. She read the relevant clause aloud at the kitchen table. Her voice was steady. She was aware that it was steady. She found this slightly surprising and not surprising at the same time. The clause was as precise as a legal document written by someone who expected it to be tested. Georgian diamond and emerald necklace, silver-topped gold, 5 emeralds, 18 diamonds, centerpiece emerald 2.3 carats. Left to Margaret Eleanor Whitfield Calloway exclusively and not to be considered part of the marital estate. Her mother knew. Of course her mother knew. Her mother had been watching Douglas Calloway for 22 years, and her face had never said a single word about what it saw. But she had been very, very careful with the will. The love Meg felt for her dead mother at this moment was enormous and grief-sharp and specific to that one particular woman, that particular pair of hands, that particular voice. She pressed her lips together. She would cry later. Not now. Not yet. Okay, Claire said quietly. We have something to work with. Her phone buzzed on the table. Douglas. She looked at the screen. She did not answer. She texted back, long night. Already home. Talk tomorrow. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Just that, a thumbs-up emoji. She looked at it for a moment. Then she placed the phone face down on the table. Tell me everything you know about Donna Greer's office hours, she said. She did not sleep that night. But she did not lie awake staring at the ceiling either. She moved. She did what she always did when she needed to think clearly. She put her body to a task and let her mind work around it. At 12:30 in the morning, she reorganized the filing cabinet in the study. This was her study. She had chosen the furniture herself 20 years ago, a decision Douglas had been largely indifferent to. The bookshelves held reference materials, antiques guides, auction catalogs, historical surveys of furniture and jewelry, and decorative arts from 4 continents. The cabinet had been slightly disordered for years. She had meant to address it. She addressed it now. She made 5 sections: financial, estate, property, professional, personal. She labeled each one. She worked methodically, the way she worked at the appraisal table. She discarded 3 years of takeout menus and expired coupons that had somehow migrated into the financial section. She found documents she had forgotten about. She found a birthday card from her mother from 7 years ago. She read it once and placed it in the personal section. Then she found the insurance documents for the necklace, her own copy, the one she did not know she had. She held that document for a moment. She filed it under personal. At 2 in the morning, she made tea. She sat at the kitchen table, and she did something she had not done in a very long time. She thought about her marriage, not the story of her marriage, the version she told at dinner parties. 30 years, the adventures and the shared life and the children raised together, but the actual texture of it, the specific quality of the last 5 years. When did Douglas stop looking at her when she spoke? She could almost pinpoint it, the Oslo auction. She had authenticated a piece that turned out to be significant, an early 19th century escritoire that sold for $400,000. The dealer had been beside himself with gratitude. It had been one of the better days of her professional life. She told Douglas about it over dinner that same evening. He said, "Good, so you had a good day." Then he checked his phone. She remembered thinking, that is odd. She remembered dismissing it. He was probably distracted by something at work. He was often distracted by something at work. But now, sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, she looked at that memory without the safety of the dismissal. She did not dismiss it. She let herself see it for what it had been. He had already checked out. That was 3 years ago. He had already, somewhere in himself, already decided something, already gone somewhere she was not invited. She thought of other moments, the way he began making plans without mentioning them to her until the day before. The Christmas Eve call he took in the garage, which he said was from a contractor, in December, on Christmas Eve. The new cologne that appeared casually one day, as if it had always been there. The gym membership he never mentioned and then quietly canceled 6 months later without explanation. The way he placed his phone face down on every surface as a matter of habit. She had seen all of it. She had not looked away from any of it. She had simply filed it incorrectly. She had labeled it as probably nothing, as he has been stressed, as a do not want to know. I was so careful with other people's valuable things, she thought, and I let the damage accumulate in my own life without documenting any of it. She was not angry at herself. She wanted to be clear about that inside her own mind. She was not going to spend 1 minute being angry at herself for something she had done to survive. Denial was a coping mechanism. It was not stupidity. It was not weakness. It was the thing that had allowed her to get through mornings and meetings and school pickups and professional obligations while carrying something she was not ready to face. But it was over now. The not knowing was done. At 3:15, she heard Douglas's key in the lock. She stayed in the kitchen. She heard him in the hallway. The study light went on briefly, then off. He had probably expected to find the study empty. He had probably expected her to be asleep. Then she heard him in the kitchen doorway. He stopped when he saw her at the table. "You are up," he said. "I just could not sleep," she said. Her voice was entirely normal. 30 years of professional work had given her that. The ability to keep her voice exactly where she needed it, regardless of what was happening underneath. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone running a rapid calculation. She saw it now, the way she had always seen it and always chosen not to name it, calculating whether she knew something, deciding what she was. "You left the gala early," he said. "I had a headache," she said. He nodded. She watched him relax by a fraction, a measurement so small that she might once have missed it. He said it was fine, the gala, long that she had not missed much of anything. He poured himself a glass of water. He asked if she wanted anything. She said no, she was fine. He went upstairs. She listened to his footsteps moving above her. Casual, certain. The footsteps of a man who believed he had managed the situation successfully. She wrapped both hands around her tea mug. She let herself feel the full size of it for exactly 60 seconds. The anger, the sheer audacity of it. He had taken her grandmother's necklace and placed it around his girlfriend's neck and walked into a charity gala and smiled at people they both knew. 60 seconds. Then she filed it, labeled it correctly this time. Filed it under motivation to do what comes next. At 8 in the morning, she called Donna Greer's office. She gave her name to the assistant. She said it was urgent. She said it concerned her mother Helen Whitfield's estate. The assistant put her on hold for 90 seconds. When she came back, she said Ms. Greer could see Meg at 10. Meg said thank you. She hung up. She texted Claire, 10 o'clock, Donna's office. "Can you come?" Claire texted back in under a minute. "I am already in the car." Donna Greer's office was on the 4th floor of a sandstone building downtown. It smelled like paper and old wood and something that Meg had always thought might be bay rum. She found this smell comforting. It smelled like the permanence of careful records and the durability of properly documented things. Donna herself was 60 years old, precise, stout, steel gray hair cut short, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She had the manner of someone who had seen most things and been surprised by very few of them. When Meg told her what had happened, the gala and the necklace and the jewelry box and the deliberateness of it, Donna listened without interrupting, without shifting expression, without reaching for paper. Then she took off her glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. Your mother was very specific, Donna said. That bequest is airtight. I drafted it myself. The necklace was your personal property from the moment of your mother's death 3 years ago. So his taking it, Claire said, constitutes theft under state law, Donna replied. It was not a marital asset. It was never a marital asset. He had no legal claim to it whatsoever. She paused. Has he attempted to sell it? I do not know, Meg said. I only found out last night. If it is still in the girlfriend's possession, it is recoverable. If he has attempted to sell it, the situation is more complex, but still recoverable. The necklace was insured. My mother kept a policy on it. I assumed it lapsed when she died. Donna opened a folder that was already on her desk. She had come prepared, which was very like Donna. She slid a document across the desk to Meg. Meg looked at it. Her mother had transferred the insurance policy to Meg's name. 3 months before she died, she had updated the beneficiary and the primary insured. The policy was current. The premium was being paid automatically from an account Meg had not known about. Her mother had set it up. Her mother had paid it forward, 2 full years of premiums, before she died. Meg sat very still. She pictured her mother, ill, tired. The spring before she died, sitting at her desk in the house in Vermont, dealing with paperwork, making sure the policy would be paid, making sure the necklace would be covered, making sure Meg would have something no one could take, except someone had taken it anyway. She knew, Meg said, very quietly. I think, Donna said, equally quietly, your mother wanted to ensure there was no gap in coverage or provenance should the necklace ever need to be claimed. Should the necklace ever need to be claimed. Not should you ever lose it. Not in case of accident. Should it ever need to be claimed. As if her mother had understood that the danger might not be accident or carelessness. Meg thought, she saw what I refused to see. She saw it and she said nothing to me because she knew I was not ready. And so she did the practical thing instead. She made sure the paperwork was correct. She felt something enormous and very specific then. The particular grief of being loved by someone who understood you better than you understood yourself. The grief of recognizing the shape of someone's protection only after they were gone. I deserved better than this. She knew it now with a clarity that was clean and cold. She had known it for some time, the way you know things you are not ready to say directly. But right now, in Donna Greer's office, in the smell of paper and old wood, she said it to herself without flinching. I deserve better than this. I need to know what my options are, Meg said. All of them. Today. Donna leaned forward slightly. First, a police report. Document the theft formally. Second, I reach out to Douglas or his attorney with a demand letter. The property must be returned within 72 hours. Third, if he does not comply, we seek an emergency injunction. And if the woman who has it needs to return it as well, Meg said. She is in possession of stolen property, Donna said. Whether she knew it or not, she must return it. If she does not comply voluntarily, she becomes party to the legal action. Meg thought about that. The woman in the red dress. The easy laugh. The head tilted back under the chandelier light. She was wearing it the way you wear a gift, because she believed it was one. Meg did not feel what she had expected to feel. She had anticipated pure fury. What she felt was something considerably more complicated. A recognition that had nothing to do with rivalry and everything to do with a kind of terrible clarity. This woman had also been lied to. She had also been handed a story by someone very skilled at telling stories. And she had believed it because believing stories was something people did. That did not make her innocent. It did not remove the choice she had made, but it made her human. Before we file anything, Meg said, I want to give her the chance to return it voluntarily, without any drama, because what I want is the necklace back, not a war. Donna looked at her for a moment. That is very reasonable, she said, and strategically sound. A voluntary return demonstrates good faith on your part. If she refuses, we have additional evidence of knowing possession. How do we contact her? Claire asked. I can find her, Meg said. She said it simply. A statement of plain fact. And then she thought, I have been finding lost things my entire career. Pieces that ended up where they should not be. Objects without proper records. Things that needed to be returned to their correct provenance. I can certainly find this one. On the drive home, Claire drove and Meg sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window at the city. She was quiet for most of the drive. Then she said, You know what I keep thinking about? What? Claire asked. She put that necklace on and she did not know what it was. She thought it was a gesture, a romantic gift. She thought it was beautiful and she put it on and she felt. Meg paused. She felt valued. Meg, Claire said, I am not defending her. I am just. She paused again. It was my grandmother's necklace. My great-grandmother brought it from Scotland in a coat hem. and she wore it to a charity gala because Douglas wanted to appear generous and did not want to spend money that was actually his. The silence after that was specific and heavy. "He used your grandmother's necklace," Claire said finally as a prop in his own story. "Yes," Meg said. "That is exactly what he did." She looked out the window at the city passing. She thought not anymore. She asked Claire to drop her at the park. Claire argued for a full minute. Meg was unmoved. Claire wrote 3 emergency numbers on a card from her wallet and handed it over. Meg took the card without irony. She got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk and watched Claire drive away. The park near their house was almost empty at noon on a Tuesday. A woman with a stroller moving along the main path, 2 teenage boys eating lunch on a bench near the fountain, a dog, old and gray around the muzzle, walking slowly beside an elderly man with a cane. Meg found her bench, the one near the old oak, the one she had been coming to since the children were small, before that even. Since she and Douglas first moved into the house, and she discovered the park and claimed this particular bench as hers. 20 years of coming to this bench when she needed to think. She sat down, she let it come now, not the anger. The anger was useful, and she had put it somewhere she could access it cleanly when she needed it. She let the grief come, the specific grief, her mother's hands, the green velvet pouch, the weight of the necklace when it settled against her collarbone for the first time, cool and heavy, and with the particular solidity of something that had outlasted everyone who had ever worn it. She cried quietly. She had a tissue in her coat pocket. She had known this was coming. She had waited until she was somewhere she could do it, without performing anything for anyone. She thought about her mother's last year, the clarity of it, the strange intimacy of watching someone you love prepare to leave. Her mother had become very direct near the end, very simple. She stopped spending energy on anything that was not essential. "Are you happy?" her mother had asked her once. Not in the casual way, not as small talk, as a real question, asked with real attention, with her eyes on Meg's face and nowhere else. Meg had said, "I am fine." Her mother had looked at her. She had not pushed. She had not said, "That is not what I asked you." Meg had gone home that night and sat on this very bench and thought about it. She had told herself, fine is good, fine is stable, fine is a reasonable outcome for a long marriage. Fine is what most people have, and most people do not complain about it. She should have heard her own voice saying it. Now she sat on the bench in the cold noon air of a Tuesday in March, and she thought about that evening, and she thought about the insurance policy her mother had quietly transferred without saying a word. And she thought about the will clause that Donna had drafted with such careful specificity. And she understood that her mother had been watching for years and had said nothing because she knew Meg was not ready. And so she had done the practical thing instead. She had made sure the armor was protected even when her daughter had stopped wearing it. The dog passed by again. He paused at her bench and looked at her with the calm sympathy that very old dogs seem to carry as a natural consequence of having lived alongside humans for so long. She reached down and scratched behind his ear. "Good dog," she said. He wagged twice, moved on. She wiped her eyes, she straightened, she thought, "Somewhere along the way I became invisible, not to the world. In my own marriage, I stopped being a person Douglas saw. I became something he had. A useful, quiet presence that appeared beside him at events and maintained the household and did not cause complications." She thought, "I let that happen. I did not fight it." She thought, "I was afraid of this exact thing, this bench, this park. This being alone with the truth of it," she thought, "and the truth is also everything that comes next." The wind moved through the old oak above her. The leaves made their particular sound, the soft percussion of old trees in early spring, half bare still, finding their way back. She stayed a while longer. Then she took out her phone. She searched for Serena Voss interior design. It took 40 seconds to find the website. It was beautiful, actually. Clean lines, thoughtful photography, considered color choices, and evident good taste in every image. A professional woman, a human being with a portfolio and client testimonials, and a professional email address and a life she had built herself. Meg looked at the website for a long time. She was not going to yell at this woman. She was not going to cry in front of her. She was not going to perform any of the roles that women in her position were supposedly required to perform. She was going to get her grandmother's necklace back. She went home. She sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. She pulled up 3 documents: the insurance record, the will clause, the photograph from the gala. She wrote the email slowly and with care. She wrote 4 drafts. She removed every line that sounded wounded. She kept every line that was simply factual and accurate and could not be argued with. She read it 3 times, then once more, then she sent it. Subject line: regarding the necklace you wore Saturday evening. She closed the laptop. She went to the kitchen. She made lunch. She ate it at the kitchen table in the pale March afternoon light. Her hands were shaking slightly. She noticed this. She acknowledged it. She did not judge it. She was doing a significant thing, and she was frightened, and both those were true, and neither of them required her to stop. She was very much alive. That was the thought that surprised her. Sitting in her own kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon with her marriage ending and her grandmother's necklace in a stranger's drawer, she thought, I am very much alive. She could not remember the last time she had felt that so clearly. She had been alive presumably every day for 53 years. But feeling it was different, feeling it was its own thing entirely. The reply came at 4:47 in the afternoon. She almost missed it. She had spent the afternoon dealing with the practical things. She called the insurance company. She pulled the appraisal documents from the filing cabinet she had reorganized the night before. She texted Philip Tate to ask whether he knew a good forensic appraiser in the city, someone who could verify the piece on short notice if it became necessary. Philip texted back immediately. He said he would come himself. He also said, "Are you all right?" She wrote back, "Getting there," which was true, which was more honest than fine. The email from Serena Voss was short. Meg read it standing in the hallway with her coat still on, having just come in from the driveway. I need to know more before I respond to the legal claims in this message. I would like to speak with you in person. That was all. No denial, no fury, no demand to know how Meg had obtained her email address or who she thought she was. No denial. Meg read it 3 more times. Each time the same phrase registered differently. I need to know more. Not, this is ridiculous. Not, you have the wrong person. Not, my attorney will be in contact. I need to know more. She thinks she has questions, Meg realized. She was told something about this necklace and she is now wondering about what she was told. Meg wrote back, tomorrow, 11. I will suggest somewhere public. Is that acceptable? The reply came in 4 minutes. Yes. She took her coat off. She hung it on the hook in the hallway. She stood there for a moment in the quiet of the house. Douglas came home at 6:30. He kissed her on the cheek. He asked how her day was. She said fine. She asked about his. He said busy. He poured wine. He turned on the television. They ate dinner across from each other with the comfortable, well-practiced distance of people who had stopped really seeing each other and had agreed, without ever saying so, to call that peace. She watched him. She was watching him the way she watched a piece at the appraisal table when she had been asked to evaluate it, with the specific and unsentimental attention of someone assessing actual value against perceived value, with the professional eye that did not flinch and did not sentimentalize. He was handsome still. He kept himself in good condition. He told good stories. He was charming in exactly the way she had once found charming and now found, and she searched for the word carefully, hollow, not melodramatically hollow, just as a material assessment. The sound is different when the wood is not solid all the way through. He sensed something was different, and she could see him trying to read her. He did not have the vocabulary for it. He had been reading her as a fixture, as a piece of furniture as she had thought at the park, and fixtures did not withhold things. He did not have the tools to read her as a woman who knew something he needed her not to know. He asked twice whether she was feeling all right. She smiled. Just tired, she said. He believed it, because it was the most convenient thing to believe. She went to bed before him. She lay in the dark. She thought about the meeting with Serena Voss in the morning. She thought about what Donna had said. She thought about Philip coming down from the city with his appraiser's loop and his decades of expertise and his quiet, steady way of simply being present without needing to fill the space with commentary. She thought about her mother saying, not to the marriage, to you. She had given herself so completely to this marriage, her time, her attention, her capacity for joy and surprise and genuine enthusiasm. She did not regret all of it. Some of it had been real. Some of those 30 years had been genuinely good. She would not pretend otherwise, not even now. Pretending would be its own kind of lie. But somewhere in all of it, she had stopped saving any part for herself. She had handed herself over so completely that she had forgotten the category existed. She was going to retrieve it. Piece by piece, she was going to retrieve it. First the necklace, then everything else. She slept, surprisingly and deeply. Her body had apparently decided it believed in the direction she was moving. Her body was not confused about any of it. Her body knew. She woke at 6 with very clear thoughts. She got dressed. She drove to the coffee shop 45 minutes early and chose a table in the corner where she could see the door and anyone who walked through it. She ordered tea. She sat down. She waited. At 10:59, Serena Voss walked in. She was shorter than she had seemed at the gala. That was the first thing Meg noticed. And younger, or at least more uncertain. There was no red dress and no chandelier light now. She was in a cream blouse and dark jeans. She had the look of someone who had not slept particularly well and was not pretending otherwise. She looked around the coffee shop. Meg raised her hand. Serena came over and sat down across from her. She ordered coffee from the server who appeared. When the coffee arrived, she wrapped both hands around the cup the way people do when they need something solid to hold. They looked at each other. I did not know he was married, Serena said. She said it before Meg could say anything at all, directly, without preamble. Just put it on the table between them as a fact that needed to be stated first before anything else could happen. He told me he was separated, she continued, still living in the house because of the logistics of it. He said there was nothing there. He said the marriage had been over for years. Meg nodded once. She was not surprised. She was not even hurt by it in the specific way she had expected to be hurt. She had read enough of these situations. She had moved through enough of her clients' lives in the course of her work to have learned the shape of this particular story. Nothing there. Effectively separated. Two people who are really just roommates at this point. When did he give you the necklace? Meg asked. Serena looked at her coffee. 2 weeks ago. He said it was an antique piece he had kept for years. A family piece he wanted to give me. Something meaningful. It is a family piece, Meg said. My family's piece. It belonged to my great-grandmother. She brought it from Edinburgh in 1922. My mother left it to me specifically, separately from the marital estate 3 years ago. I have the legal documents and the insurance policy and the original appraisal. Serena was quiet for a long time. I looked it up, she said finally. Last night, after I got your email, I looked up Georgian diamond and emerald necklaces with Colombian emeralds at that quality level. There are not many pieces like it. I could see when he gave it to me that it was significant. But he said, I know what he said, Meg replied. I wore it once, Serena said, to one event, and then I put it in my drawer because it felt. She searched for the right words. It felt like too much, like too serious a gift for where we were. I did not understand what I was being asked to accept. She reached into the bag beside her chair. She took out a familiar object. A dark green velvet pouch, old and worn smooth at the corners, tied with a silk cord that had been reteed and reteed over many decades. She placed it on the table between them. Meg looked at it. She did not reach for it yet. I have had it for 2 weeks and I wore it once, Serena said. I did not know what it was. But I also did not ask the right questions when I should have. She paused. I am sorry. Meg picked up the velvet pouch. She knew the weight of it before she opened it, that exact weight. The rightness of it, the specific gravity of something that belonged in her hands. She untied the silk cord. She opened the pouch. She looked inside. The necklace was there. Emeralds and diamonds. Silver-topped gold. The centerpiece emerald the color of deep water. 2.3 carats. Internally flawless. Every stone she had documented at 23 years old, sitting at her mother's table with her loupe and her careful professional attention. She closed the pouch. She held it in both hands. There were a great many things she could have said at this moment. She had prepared some of them during the drive over. Sharp things, true things, things that would have been accurate and deserved and entirely within her rights. Thank you for returning it, she said. Serena nodded. Her coffee sat untouched. I ended it with him, she said. Last night, after your email, I ended it. Meg did not say good. She did not offer congratulations. She did not perform gratitude for something she had not asked for and had not been waiting for. But she did say, because she meant it, he is very good at the story he tells. The separated man, the misunderstood husband, the marriage that has been over for years. He has been telling that story for a long time. I understand that now, Serena said. I did not understand it for a very long time, Meg said. I am not telling you that to make you feel better about yourself. I am telling you because it is true. He is very skilled at it. They sat with that for a moment. 2 women and a table between them and a velvet pouch with a history longer than either of their lives. What are you going to do? Serena asked. Meg looked at the velvet pouch in her hands. Everything I should have done sooner, she said. She stood up. She gathered her things. She held the necklace. One more thing, Serena said. Meg looked at her. When I looked up the necklace last night, the appraisal values I found. Serena met her eyes directly. He told me it was worth approximately $20,000. Meg understood immediately what Serena was telling her. $2.3 million, and he had told his girlfriend it was worth $20,000. He had wanted to appear generous without revealing the true nature of what he was disposing of. He had wanted credit for the gesture without the exposure of the theft. He understated by approximately $2.28 million, Meg said. Serena absorbed this. Something moved through her face. Not quite anger and not quite shame, but somewhere between them. The specific expression of someone who has just understood the full shape of a deception they were part of. He used us both, she said. Yes, Meg said. He did. She walked out of the coffee shop. The sunlight was cool and bright on the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment, the velvet pouch in her hand, the familiar weight of it, the particular and unmistakable rightness of it after it had been in the wrong place. She thought of Eleanor. She thought of her mother. She put the pouch in her coat pocket and walked to her car. She called Donna from the driver's seat. I have the necklace, she said. Good, Donna said. Now we talk about everything else. There was no clean way to end a long marriage. Meg knew this. She had watched it happen to clients and friends and her own sister 20 years ago. It was not a procedure, it was a dismantling. It took time and it was sometimes ugly, and there were days when the sheer accumulated weight of the paperwork and the decisions and the dividing of a shared life was simply exhausting in a way that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with duration. But she discovered something she had not anticipated. Relief. Not relief that the marriage was ending. Not satisfaction at any of the wreckage. Just the specific quiet relief of a body that has stopped compensating for a misalignment it has learned to call normal. The relief you feel when you finally set down something heavy that you had stopped noticing you were carrying. She met with Donna twice in the following week. She reviewed the marital assets with the same care she brought to appraising any estate. Accurate, methodical, without sentimentality. She was surprised to find several financial discrepancies. And then, when she thought about it for a few seconds, not surprised at all. Money moved from joint accounts into a structure she had not known about. Not so much as to be obviously conspicuous, just enough to be significant. Over the time it had been accumulating, Douglas was very good at managing appearances. He was less good at managing paper trails. She did not confront him yet. She documented first, she verified. She built the complete record before she said a single word. It was the same principle she applied at the appraisal table. You established the full picture before you delivered the assessment. She called Philip. They met for lunch at the Italian place near her firm, the one they had been going to for 10 years on occasion when work brought them to the same part of the city. He brought his loop and his expertise and his particular quality of attention, the kind that registered what people actually said rather than what they seemed to be saying. She showed him the necklace. He examined each stone with the careful focus of someone who genuinely loved the work for its own sake. Your great-grandmother had extraordinary taste, he said. She had extraordinary everything, Meg replied. She told him the broad outline of what had happened. He listened the way he always listened, fully, without rushing toward a response. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. You seem different, he said. Different how? She asked. More present, he said. Like you are actually in the room with me rather than managing the room around me. She thought about this. I think I am done managing things that do not deserve management, she said. He nodded as if this made complete sense to him, because she understood it did. She also called Nora Whitfield, her mother's oldest friend, 83 now. Sharp as she had always been, living in the cottage in Vermont where she had lived for 40 years. Meg called not because she needed anything specific from her, but because Nora had known her mother, and she needed to hear a voice that had known her mother and could remember her clearly. I have been waiting for you to call, Nora said, without irony. Simply as a fact. Did you know about the necklace? Meg asked. About the situation? Your mother gave me the original insurance appraisal, Nora said. She handed it to me in person. She said if Meg ever needs it, she will know what she needs it for. Meg was quiet for a moment. I have it if you need it, Nora said. I think I will need it, Meg said. Thank you, Nora. Your mother, Nora said, was the smartest woman I have ever known, and she loved you more than you will ever fully understand. I know, Meg said. You don't, Nora said. Kindly, without cruelty, just as the truth. But you are going to start finding out. In the 2 weeks that followed, Meg noticed things she had not noticed in years. The specific quality of morning light in her own kitchen. The sound the wind made in the oak at the end of the block. The particular satisfaction of a workday that went well. An appraisal concluded with certainty. A client who left with accurate information and something they had not understood before they walked in. She noticed the pleasure of her own company. She had forgotten that she was good company. That she was, in fact, interesting to herself. That she had opinions and observations and a particular way of moving through the world that was entirely hers and did not require anyone else's attention to have value. She noticed this the way you notice something you have always possessed and simply forgotten to use. Like a skill that was there all along, waiting. She made the appointment with Douglas for a Thursday evening in March. She chose the time deliberately. Not morning when he was scattered, not late night when things had a way of escalating. Thursday evening after dinner when the house was quiet. When she was at her most steady, she made tea. She put the documents in a folder. She sat down at the kitchen table. She waited. She had prepared for this the way she prepared for a significant appraisal. She knew what she had. She had verified every piece of it completely. She knew the full record. She knew the weak points in the opposing case and the strong points in her own. She was ready in the specific way that comes from thoroughness rather than from certainty, because certainty was not the goal. Accuracy was the goal. Douglas came home and found her at the table. He sat down across from her with the particular attentiveness of a man who had sensed something approaching for several days, without being able to identify it. He was watching her carefully. He was doing the calculation, the one she had been watching him do for years without naming it. I know about Serena, Meg said. He opened his mouth. I am not finished, she said. Her voice was level, completely level. I know about Serena. I know about the necklace. I know about the accounts. She placed her hand on the folder. I have documentation for all of it. Donna Greer is my attorney, and the process is already in motion. He looked at her hand on the folder and then at her face. I want you to know, she said, that I am not doing this in anger. I was angry. I did my anger in private in the appropriate time and place. What I am doing now is simply the next thing, Meg, he said. And something genuine moved into his face. Not guilt exactly, or not only guilt. Something closer to the shock of being fully seen for the first time in a long time. The disorientation of it. We can. There are ways to address this. We could try to. I do not want to fix this marriage, she said. That is what I need you to understand first. I have thought about it very carefully. I do not want to repair it. I want to end it with as much integrity as possible, because I am going to have to live with how I do this for the rest of my life. He was quiet for what felt like a full minute. She watched him cycle through options. She had seen this in negotiations. The specific expression of someone realizing that the position they had carefully prepared for was not the position they were actually in. The necklace, he began, has been returned to me, she said. Serena Voss returned it voluntarily. She was cooperative and straightforward. I would like you to extend her the same cooperation in this process. She paused. She ended things with you. I thought you should know, since I imagine you were not expecting it. She watched his jaw tighten by the smallest fraction. She is going to be fine, Meg said. Not with cruelty. Simply as a factual assessment, the kind she made in her work every day. People generally are when they stop being lied to. She opened the folder. She slid the first document across the table toward him. This is a list of what Donna will be requesting, she said. I would like you to read it carefully. And I would like you to consider being straightforward about the accounts. It will be faster and considerably less expensive for both of us if you are. He did not pick up the document. He was looking at her face instead. Who are you? He said. He meant it genuinely. She could hear it. He was looking at her the way people look at something they recognize but cannot place. Something familiar in a context where it had no business being. She thought, good question. I am the woman who appraised your mother's estate in 2010, she said. Who authenticated the Flemish drawing that put your business on the map in 2014. Who sat in the parking lot of every development site you were closing when you needed somewhere to make the calls. Who raised 2 children and maintained a career and kept a house and showed up to every event and every dinner and every function for 30 years. She paused. I am the woman who has been here the entire time. You simply stopped looking. He looked at the table. I made mistakes, he said. You did, she said simply. I never meant for it to become what it became. I know, she said. And she did know. He had not planned most of it. He had drifted, the way some people drift, finding the current convenient and calling it choice. Following the path of least emotional effort and believing that was the same as making a decision. But it happened, and here we are. She stood up. She took her tea with her. I am going to sleep in the guest room, she said. I think that is the most sensible arrangement while we work through the practical details. He nodded. He looked diminished, smaller than he had looked in years. She found this more sad than satisfying, because he had been real once. The best parts of those 30 years had been genuinely real. She was not going to pretend they had not been. Pretending would be its own kind of lie, and she was done with lies of all varieties, including the comfortable ones. Meg, he said. She looked back. I am sorry. She considered this for a moment. She considered all the things she could say to it. The ones that would wound him. The ones that would be accurate. The ones that were simply true and did not require performance in any direction. I believe you, she said finally. It does not change much, but I believe you. She went upstairs. She made the guest bed with the Edinburgh linens, the ones her mother had given her from the set. Her grandmother brought over the same Atlantic crossing as the necklace, packed in the same trunk, surviving the same distance. She pulled the sheets smooth and tucked the corners with care and stood back and looked at the bed she had made. She got in, she lay in the dark, and she took inventory. Sad, yes. The specific sadness of ending something that had contained real years and real moments, and at least some portion of genuine feeling, yes to that. Relieved, yes. The relief was real and present, and she was not going to apologize for it or qualify it. Afraid of what came next. Yes, she was allowed to be afraid. Being afraid did not mean she had made the wrong decision. Being afraid simply meant she was paying attention to the size of the thing, and something else. Something she had not felt in a long time. Something clear and undeniable and entirely hers. She was here, in this room, in this specific life, fully and completely here. Not managing the room, not performing the expected response, not monitoring the space between herself and someone else's comfort. Just here. She had not felt that in years. She found it felt like coming home to a place she had not known she missed until the moment she arrived. 3 months later, it was a Saturday morning in June. Her office caught the morning light in the way she loved best. through the windows on the east side, which she had chosen when she took the position and had never once regretted. The bookcases full of reference materials, the appraisal table with its specialized lighting, the particular organized order of a space that was entirely hers, arranged according to no one's priorities but her own. She was finishing a report on a collection of early 19th century watercolors discovered in an estate in Connecticut. Good pieces. Underestimated, as so many things were when the people living alongside them had stopped really looking. Three of them clearly above the category the estate had placed them in, and one of them considerably more than that. She had been working with them for 3 weeks, and she had the particular satisfaction of work done with complete attention, the satisfaction of seeing clearly what was actually there. Philip knocked on the open door at 9:15. He had 2 cups of coffee. He had been bringing coffee on Saturday mornings since February. This was not a coincidence. She had not fully decided what to do about it, but she was thinking about it more than she had been in January, and considerably more than she had been in December, and she found that she did not mind the thinking. "How is the Connecticut collection?" he asked. "3 of them are quite good," she said. "One is remarkable. The 4th, I am still considering." "You are never wrong about the remarkable ones," he said. "Not often," she replied. He set the coffee on the corner of her table. He looked at her desk. The velvet pouch was sitting there in the morning light. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "I am taking it to be cleaned today," she said, "and officially registered under my name in the insurance system. And then I am going to wear it." "Where?" he asked. "The Bennett Foundation Gala," she said. "Next Saturday. Claire is coming. It benefits the Women's Legal Fund," which seemed appropriate. Philip smiled. He had a good smile, unhurried, real, the smile of someone who did not need to perform anything for anyone. "Your great-grandmother would approve," he said. She thought about Eleanor, coming across the ocean with nothing but what she could carry, and the knowledge of who she was. The coat with the hem, the council chamber in Edinburgh in 1931. The men in their chairs telling her to sit down and be quiet, and Eleanor not sitting down and not being quiet. The necklace against her throat, not for vanity, for something different. The reminder of who she was and where she had come from and what she was made of. The armor her mother had named it correctly. She picked up the velvet pouch. She held it for a moment, feeling the weight through the fabric. The past 3 months had been what she expected and not what she expected in equal measure. The practical dismantling of a long marriage was, as she had known it would be, slow and sometimes exhausting and occasionally ugly in the way that the truth became ugly when it had been avoided for a considerable time. There were days when the paperwork alone felt like a full-time position. There were evenings when she sat in the apartment and felt the weight of the silence differently than she wanted to. But Douglas had, ultimately, been cooperative. More cooperative than she had anticipated. She thought sometimes that being fully seen had done something to him, not changed him in any fundamental way, but perhaps reminded him of something. She did not know. His interior life was no longer her territory to map. The settlement was fair, not easy, fair. The house was sold. She had an apartment in the building 3 blocks from the firm. She had chosen it herself, quickly, without second-guessing the choice, which was itself a new thing. It was smaller than she had expected to find herself in at 53. She found it almost entirely a relief. She thought about the letter she had written to Serena Voss 2 months ago. Not forgiveness, exactly. That was not quite the right word for what the letter was. More like acknowledgement. 2 women who had been sorted through by the same man's convenient story. One of them would be all right, and one of them would be all right, and they had, improbably, corresponded twice since. She did not know what that was or what it would become. She did not need to know yet. Not everything required an immediate category. She picked up the coffee Philip had brought. She drank some of it. Outside the window, the June light was doing what June light did, which was the most generous kind of light. The kind that showed things as they actually were, without softening them or dramatizing them, just clearly. She thought about the appraisal she had done on the necklace at 23 years old, sitting at her mother's dining room table with her loupe and her notes, and the careful professional attention she had been trained to bring to everything she examined, documenting every stone, measuring, cataloging, writing the description in language that was precise enough to be irrefutable. Her mother had watched her the entire time. When Meg handed over the finished report, her mother read through it slowly. Then she set it down. She said, "Now you know what it is worth. But remember, the number only tells you what someone would pay for it. It does not tell you what it means." Meg had nodded at the time. She thought she understood. She understood it differently now. She put the coffee down. She stood up from her desk. She went to the mirror on the back of the office door. She had kept it there for 20 years, for clients who wanted to try pieces on, to see how an object looked against the landscape of their own face and throat and collarbone. She kept it there because context mattered. The right piece in the right place told you something that neither the piece alone nor the place alone could ever tell you. She opened the velvet pouch. She took out the necklace. She looked at it for a moment in her own hands, all that silver and gold and green and white. All those stones that had survived Edinburgh and the Atlantic crossing, and a coat hem, and 5 women, and 1 theft, and decades and centuries of everything the world had tried to do to them. They were fine. They were more than fine. They were exactly what they had always been. She turned to the mirror. She clasped the necklace around her own neck. The cool of it, the weight of it, the particular and unmistakable feeling of something settling exactly where it had always settled, just above the notch of her sternum. The centerpiece emerald, the color of deep water, exactly there. She looked at herself. Not the woman who had stood at the edge of the charity gala 3 months ago, watching a stranger wear her grandmother's necklace while her husband laughed nearby and did not look at her. Not the woman who had sat in a parking garage for 11 minutes without starting the engine, hands in her lap, learning the shape of knowing. Not the woman who had reorganized a filing cabinet at 12:30 in the morning because it was the only thing she could control. Not the woman who had cried quietly on a park bench with a tissue she had prepared in advance, grieving her mother and her marriage and everything that had been taken or misplaced or let go without her noticing. Not any of those women exactly, but she carried all of them, every single one. She looked at the necklace. She looked at her own face. She thought of Eleanor, standing before the council in Edinburgh in 1931 with the necklace at her throat, and the men in their chairs telling her to sit down and be quiet, and Eleanor not sitting down and not being quiet. She had spent the past 3 months thinking about what it meant to decide. Not the immediate decisions, the legal ones and the practical ones and the logistical ones that had to be made and made quickly, but the underlying decision, the one beneath all the others. The prison door had been unlocked for a long time. She understood that now, with a clarity that was not comfortable and was not supposed to be comfortable. It had been unlocked for longer than she wanted to admit, and she had stood on one side of it and told herself she was choosing to stay because it was safer or because there were good things inside or because she did not know what was on the other side. And all of those things had been true, and none of them had been the whole truth. The whole truth was that she was afraid, and the fear was not wrong. Exactly this. The apartment and the Saturday morning and the guest room with the Edinburgh linens and the conversation at the kitchen table, this was what she had been afraid of. This and everything it required and everything that had preceded it and all the being alone with the truth of it. She had been right to know it would be hard. She had been wrong to let the hardness stop her. She straightened. She looked at herself in the mirror with the necklace at her throat, and she thought, I am ready now. I have been ready. And ready is not the same as unafraid. And that is fine. That is actually fine this time. Fine in the way she had always wanted fine to mean and never quite managed to make it mean until now. She went back to her desk. She had 3 more appraisals to finish this morning. A call with Donna at noon about the final details of the settlement. Lunch with Claire at 1, the Italian place near the park. And this afternoon a new client was coming in, an estate in Connecticut, a family of some means who had been living alongside a collection they did not fully understand. They needed someone to look at what they had and tell them what it actually was. That was what she did. She told people exactly what they had. She was very good at this work. She had always been very good at it. She had simply forgotten for a while to apply the same attention to herself that she applied so readily to everything else. She had turned the appraiser's eye outward for 30 years and left herself unexamined. She was not going to make that mistake again. She picked up her pen. She pulled the next file toward her. She thought about the woman in the watercolor, the remarkable one from the Connecticut collection, the one that had been sitting on her appraisal table for 3 weeks now, standing at the edge of the autumn field with her back to the viewer, looking at something just outside the frame. The particular and unmistakable posture of someone who has already made the choice and is now standing in the moment just after it. The moment that is the beginning of everything the choice opens up, not the moment of choosing, the moment after it. The beginning, she thought about Eleanor. She thought about her mother. She thought about the necklace cool and heavy and certain against her sternum, and the long line of women who had worn it before her and done difficult things, and refused to sit down and refused to be quiet, and kept moving through the world with the particular combination of fear and intention that was not courage exactly, but was what courage looked like from the inside. She breathed in. She began.